Ever since George Washington set the tone with his first presidential inauguration, Inauguration Day has evolved into a landmark event that celebrates each newly elected president. But while the inaugural speech is often the highlight of this special day, it's just one component of the incoming president's itinerary, many of which have been added to the event over time. And let's just say those other bedrock Inauguration Day events come with a unique history of their own. Oh yes, there is history here. Before we dive into the past together, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon so that you never miss an episode. Both are free to do and go a long way toward helping us continue exploring the little-known stories that shaped our world. In the first part of our series exploring the secrets of Inauguration Day, we traveled back to Washington's first inauguration and explored some interesting speeches, as well as the little-known reason why Inauguration Day was moved from March 4th to January 20th. Now, we'll visit the constitutionally required part of the inauguration, the oath. According to the Constitution, all presidents are required to state that they solemnly swear or affirm to faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and to preserve, protect, and defend the U.S. Constitution to the best of their ability. Other than that, there's not much guidance on how it should be performed, including who can administer the oath. Following Washington's inauguration, the oath has typically been administered by a Supreme Court justice to the incoming president, usually the Chief Justice. But this is more tradition than a constitutional requirement, and there have been some notable exceptions. Lyndon B. Johnson, for example, became the first and only president to take his oath of office from an airplane following the assassination of John F. Kennedy. U.S. District Judge Sarah T. Hughes administered the oath of office, becoming the first woman to do so, and the last person to have not been a member of the Supreme Court. But even back on land, there were some equally unique ones. Consider then Vice President Calvin Coolidge, who was visiting his parents in upstate Vermont when President Warren G. Harding passed away from a heart attack. But because his parents' house did not have electricity or a telephone, he was, quite literally, left in the dark. Vermont Representative Porter H. Dale, who was campaigning in the area at the time, got word of Harding's death and rushed to the Coolidge homestead alongside a reporter and several local community figures to inform the vice president of what happened. It's said that he insisted that Coolidge take the oath of office immediately to ensure continuity. As luck would have it, Coolidge's father just happened to be a notary public and a justice of the peace, and he was up for the task of doing what was needed to administer the swearing-in ceremony. So at 2:47 a.m. on August 3rd, John Calvin Coolidge Sr. swore his son into the office of the presidency using the family Bible in front of a small audience consisting of the new president's wife, mother, and the other local figures. After it was done, Coolidge retired to bed. However, despite being sworn in, there was concern in Coolidge's circles whether the impromptu swearing-in ceremony was legitimate, given that Coolidge's father was a state notary public and not a federal official. But even though Coolidge could have raised Washington's first inauguration to defend the legitimacy of his swearing-in ceremony, he decided not to leave things to chance. Instead, he did a second swearing-in ceremony on August 21st, 1923, this time with a federal justice by the name of Adolph A. Holing Jr. And while the second inauguration was more traditional, it was also very notable. That's because Coolidge and his successor, Herbert Hoover, would become the only elected presidents to be sworn into office by a former president. Who was he? William Howard Taft, who was serving as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court during their administrations. Once the swearing-in ceremony concludes, the celebration begins on the streets. And although Washington is credited with having the first inaugural parade, it was more of a spontaneous event that occurred as he made his way from his home in Virginia to Federal Hall. And over the years, it became more and more extravagant. Martin Van Buren's 1837 inauguration was the first to introduce floats, paving the way for its role as a celebratory spectacle. But these events also took on a more symbolic meaning, to the benefit and detriment of the presidents-elect. In the 1800s, for example, African Americans participated in a presidential inauguration parade for the first time as more than just onlookers. In fact, it was on March 4th, 1865, when a group of African American troops marched in support of a wartime president who was about to start his second term. That commander-in-chief? None other than Abraham Lincoln, who roughly 2 years earlier took action against the institution of slavery in the country through Proclamation 95. More popularly known today as the Emancipation Proclamation. On the other hand, Woodrow Wilson's first inauguration was overshadowed by a far more prominent parade, the 1913 Women's Suffrage Procession. Organized by the National American Women's Suffrage Association, in its newly appointed chairs Alice Paul and Lucy Burns, a group of between 5,000 and 10,000 women marched along the planned parade route of Wilson's inauguration to protest Congress's inability to pass the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, which would have given women the right to vote. Ever since it was first introduced in 1878, the amendment had only come up for a single vote in Congress and failed. The issue would continue to dog Wilson in the days leading up to his second inauguration. That's when a group organized by the National Women's Party mounted the first organized protest in front of the White House, which began 10 days before his 1917 inauguration and would last for about 3 years. Eventually, Wilson would call on the Senate in September 1918 to pass the 19th Amendment, which would pave the way for women's rights. Other presidential parades were less statements on policy and more like, well, statements. Especially Dwight D. Eisenhower's inaugural parade, which took the pomp and circumstance to its furthest limits. After he delivered his speech on issues like the challenges of the Cold War, national unity, and global interdependence, spectators would be treated to the most lavish parade of all. A rodeo rider and movie star named Monty Montana actually lassoed the president while he stood at the podium. Eisenhower, who was a fan of Western movies, did not seem to mind the stunt at all. In fact, Monty had originally suggested presenting Eisenhower and his vice president, Richard Nixon, with cowboy hats. But Eisenhower was game to go even further. And that was not the only highlight. The inaugural parade featured nearly 30,000 marchers, 50 floats, and 65 bands. Not to mention horses, elephants, and even an Alaskan dog team. And as this occurred during the onset of the Cold War, Eisenhower's parade even featured an atomic cannon. But don't worry, there was nothing dangerous in the cannon itself, although it was capable of firing a nuclear device. However, there was plenty of danger lurking around the parade for the second presidential inauguration of Eisenhower's running mate. For the pigeons, anyway. Nixon ruffled plenty of feathers when he spent $13,000 in taxpayer money to spray his parade route with Roost No More, a chemical deterrent. The sticky spray, which had been used incident-free during prior inaugurations, was designed to keep birds from landing on sprayed-on surfaces by irritating their feet. However, at this inauguration, the spray did far more damage. Somehow, the substance got onto the actual birds and weighed them down as they tried flying away. As a result, parade attendees found themselves trying to step around dead pigeon corpses as they watched the parade go by. Weirdly enough, it's not the only time inaugurations were not kind to birds, and it's something we'll go into in a bit. Of course, the inaugural celebrations do not end at the parade. Each one usually caps off with a ball celebrating the president, a tradition that started at Robert Long's Hotel on March 5, 1809, to celebrate the inauguration of James Madison. President Bill Clinton reportedly attended 14 of these balls after his second inauguration, the most of any president, but none quite measured up to Andrew Jackson's inaugural ball, which caused quite a ruckus. Jackson, a noted populist, attracted a large following to his inaugural ceremony at the Capitol, to the tune of more than 10,000 people, with some attendees traveling more than 500 miles and borrowing substantial money to see Old Hickory be sworn in. Needless to say, they were excited to see someone who shared their values ascend to the White House. Perhaps too excited. Reportedly, a ship's cable installed at the steps of the Capitol broke under the weight of the rushing crowd not long after Old Hickory concluded his inaugural speech. As it turned out, it was a sign of things to come. Because not long after Jackson was rushed out of the Capitol to his post-inaugural party at the White House, he and other Washington politicians found the executive mansion overcrowded, with well-wishers who sought to meet the president. Crowded to the point where even walking through the White House was overwhelming. At the party, visitors collided into fragile furniture, shoved past servants carrying food and spiked punch, and even stood on expensive furnishings just to get a glimpse of Jackson. It got so bad that a senator from Georgia and his wife decided to escape the White House through a nearby window. And even President Jackson himself found himself pinned against a wall as people rushed to approach him. Eventually, he was ushered out of the White House to a nearby hotel, as White House staff placed bowls of whiskey punch outside to disperse the crowd. Yet while reports from the event only described incidental damage, it proved to be quite a start to Jackson's presidential term. By contrast, Ulysses S. Grant's second inaugural ball proved to be the ultimate fail. To kick off his second term, Grant shipped in about 100 canaries to add a sing-songy vibe to his inaugural ball. Little did he know, the weather that day would not give those birds much to sing about. That's because Grant's inauguration, at 16 degrees Fahrenheit, would become the coldest inauguration on record until Reagan's 1985 inauguration. It's something the inauguration's planners did not plan ahead for, especially considering the ball was held in a temporary structure in Judiciary Square that lacked heating. It got so cold that the champagne froze and the desserts congealed. And sadly, the canaries fell victim too. All of them froze to death. James Buchanan's reception was also quite frigid. The food and champagne at his 1857 inaugural ball froze over due to the frigid temperatures, though thankfully, no animals were harmed in the process. But speaking of food, Ronald Reagan's was the most unique of the bunch, in part because of his jelly bean addiction. According to the Chicago Tribune and the Library of Congress, Reagan traded his smoking habit for a Jelly Belly habit during his tenure as California governor. In fact, he was so obsessed with the candy that he had a standing order of 60 cases of it per month. Unsurprisingly, his first inauguration in 1981 heavily featured Jelly Bellies. 3 tons of red, white, and blue ones to be exact. Company officials said they even created a blueberry flavor just for the event to keep up with the patriotic theming. Talk about a sweet start to what would become an 8-year term. For all of its pomp and circumstance, Inauguration Day has seen its fair share of oddities and interesting stories. And as each newly elected president has left their own unique mark on the event, Inauguration Day has evolved alongside the United States, and will continue to do so in the years to come. It just goes to show how even a ceremony in the public eye can hold so many mysteries. Thanks for watching There Is History Here. If you enjoyed diving into the past with us, make sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. Both are free to do and mean a lot for helping us grow our channel and reach more people. Your support helps us continue exploring the stories that shaped our world and the unique history that's right under our noses.